In the endless void between dying suns, there exists a city that should not be. It does not live, nor does it die. It hungers. A labyrinth of metal and shadow, suspended within the webway's impossible geometry, where screams echo without end, and pleasure is indistinguishable from pain. This is Kamara, the City of Shadows, where the dark Eldar, or Drukhari as they call themselves, have perfected the art of cruelty until it became their only form of existence. To walk its streets is to feel the very air flay your thoughts. Every breath is a negotiation for survival, every whisper a blade's edge. Here, beauty and horror are one and the same. Spires twist like obsidian thorns, lit by stolen suns and rivers of liquid agony that shimmer beneath glass bridges. The inhabitants, once proud kin of the Eldari, are hollowed by the curse of their ancestors, damned to feed on suffering lest their souls be devoured by she who thirsts. To them, torment is not merely a pastime, it is sustenance. They drink the screams of slaves, feast upon agony, and smile while doing so. And yet, beneath their sadistic grace lies a deeper truth, one even they refuse to speak aloud. For every act of exquisite cruelty, for every victim bled for art, there is a moment when the laughter fades and the silence creeps in. In that silence, they can almost hear her. The whisper of the Dark Prince, reaching from the warp, clawing at the edges of their minds. No empire burns forever, not even one built on suffering. But in Kamara, where the light of mercy has long since died, the only question that remains is not when they will fall, but how many will scream with them when they do. Kamarag never slept. It didn't need to. The city was alive, not in the way mortals understand life, but in the way a wound festers. Its veins were the corridors of the webway, pulsing faintly with stolen energy, while its heart was 1,000 screaming souls feeding the gluttony of its masters. To live here was to drown in sensation. The press of heat from promethium torches, the hiss of mechanized wings slicing the air, the sound of pleasure twisted into terror. Beneath the upper spires, where the light of false suns struggled to reach, lay the lower reaches, the flesh markets, the arenas, the slave pits where mortals and Xenos alike were reduced to raw currency. The air itself shimmered with narcotic incense and the reek of blood. Every stone was polished by centuries of suffering. Every chain link held a story of screams. Through this grotesque beauty walked a single figure, slender, elegant and draped in armor that shimmered like oil across water. His name was Kareth Val, a Kabbalite warrior of the Cabal of the Broken Veil. He moved like a blade's shadow, graceful and precise, the kind of presence that drew both fear and desire. Around him, Drukhari of lesser rank scattered like insects from a flame. For his gaze was rumored to strip skin from spirit. Kareth's path led him to the gladiatorial arenas, vast amphitheaters of jagged glass and void stone, where the screams of dying slaves were sculpted into sound by the city's soul-draining acoustics. Here pain was performance, and death was art. The Archons watched from above, their eyes hidden behind masks of silver and sorrow, wagering agony as one might trade gold. A dozen slaves stood trembling on the black sand below, their chains clinking softly. They came from every corner of the galaxy. A guardsman of the Astra Militarum, his armor stripped away. A green-skinned orc whose rage had long bled out through open wounds. Even a Tau Fire warrior, silent and wide-eyed, whispering prayers to gods who could not hear him here. The crowd's anticipation built like static, a hungry vibration that made the very air hum. When the gates opened, the witch cult of the Bleeding Dawn entered in a blur of color and violence. Their bodies were poetry in motion, muscles coiled with perfection, blades glinting under ghostlight. They danced through slaughter, their laughter echoing as flesh tore and bones shattered. Every scream fed them, every drop of fear drew their beauty sharper. The crowd roared, a living storm of lust and hunger, as the first blood splashed across the obsidian floor. Kareth watched in silence. His face was calm, but within something stirred, not pity, for such emotions had long since rotted in him, but a flicker of something older. A memory, maybe, of light that wasn't artificial, of a sky that wasn't made of pain. It passed quickly, devoured by the city's ever-present hum. He turned away, his boots whispering across the crystal steps, as the witch's laughter followed him like perfume. Above him, in the higher towers of Kamara, the Archons whispered about a coming raid, another strike into the void, another harvest of flesh and fear. For them it was routine, a cycle that had no end. But for Kareth, this time felt different. There was a tension in the air, an unease even among predators. Some said the city's webway paths had begun to shift, that she who thirsts had found a way to seep her claws deeper into their sanctuaries. Others dismissed it as paranoia, the usual whispers of cowards. But the nightmares were spreading. Even the homunculi, those sculptors of pain and resurrection, had begun to look over their shoulders when the lights flickered. Kamara was bleeding, and few had the courage to admit it. And somewhere, deep in the city's oldest levels, where the walls pulsed with trapped souls and the screams never stopped, something ancient began to stir. The corridors beneath the arena twisted like veins under diseased flesh. They pulsed with faint bioluminescent light, pale and sickly, leaking from the walls themselves, alive with whispers of trapped souls. Kareth walked through the narrow passageway, his boots crunching over shards of broken glass and bone. Every echo returned to him distorted, carrying the faint illusion of mocking laughter. Here, in the underworks of Kamara, life was cheaper than breath. Slaves were harvested, flayed, and repurposed. The air smelled of iron and something sweeter, the scent of cauterized skin. Tormentors moved between the cells, their robes stained with colorless fluids. Their tools clinked faintly, instruments of exquisite suffering carved by homunculi artisans whose idea of art had long since crossed into madness. Kareth passed a line of prisoners chained to the wall. A woman, her eyes burned out and her lips sewn shut, tried to reach toward him, not for help, for there was no such concept here, but for acknowledgement. For proof that she still existed. He didn't slow his pace. Her fingers brushed his vambrace as he passed, and for an instant he felt the faint warmth of her dying will before the overseer's lash silenced her forever. He hated this place, not for its cruelty. Cruelty was the pulse of Kamara, but because it reminded him too much of himself. Each scream, each whimper, was a reflection of what the Drukhari had become. Parasites gnawing on the last remnants of their own decaying souls. To survive here, one had to feed, and to feed meant to destroy. The weak were not pitied. They were sustenance. A mechanical drone hovered beside him, its lenses blinking like insect eyes. It projected a vox message directly into his ear. Archon Vether summons you to the Spire of Thorns. Come armed? Kareth didn't reply. The drone withdrew into the shadows, leaving behind a faint smell of ozone. The Archon rarely called upon his warriors personally. That meant blood was coming. Real blood, not the stage play of the arenas. He turned and began his ascent through Kamara's labyrinth. The city changed as he climbed. The shadows grew colder, the architecture more deliberate. Spires of black glass rose like frozen screams, and between them the webs of energy shimmered with deadly beauty. Transports streaked across the sky like metal insects, each one carrying raiders, slaves, or both. The hum of the city was constant, a low vibration of suffering that never ceased. As Kareth reached the Spire of Thorns, he paused. The tower loomed before him, impossibly tall, its surface crawling with carvings of agony, figures twisted together, eternally frozen mid-scream. The entrance was guarded by incubi, their claves glowing faintly in the dim light. They said nothing as he approached, only stepped aside as the doors opened silently. Inside, the air was perfumed with burning soul incense, the signature of Archon Vether. The chamber was circular, its floor a mosaic of crushed bone dust and obsidian tiles. At its center, the Archon sat on a throne that seemed to grow out of the living wall behind him, the veins of the structure feeding directly into his armor. Kareth Val. Vether's voice was smooth, melodic, and utterly devoid of warmth. You survived the last raid. Few did. Kareth bowed, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his blade. Survival was the only reward worth taking, my lord. The Archon's lips curved faintly, though his eyes remained dead. A pleasing answer. Then perhaps you'll appreciate another chance to earn that same reward. He gestured toward a hololith projector. It flared to life, displaying a planetary system spinning in eerie green light. A human world, imperial, scarred by war. Our scouts have found a gate, Vether continued. A breach into their realm. The Maquis call it Viridian Prime, a ripe vein full of souls unspoiled by fear. You will lead the strike. Kareth's gaze lingered on the flickering image of the world. The thought of fresh terror, pure, untainted, stirred something primal within him. Yet beneath that hunger was unease. Kamara's gates were unstable of late. The homunculi whispered that the fabric of the webway was thinning, that the great enemy had begun to taste their trails. But such concerns were beneath an Archon's notice. As you command, Kareth said finally. His voice was calm, but a shiver ran through him as he bowed once more. The Archon smiled, satisfied. Good. Feed well, Kareth. We are all dying after all. Might as well make it beautiful. The chamber darkened as Kareth turned to leave. Behind him the throne pulsed, faintly at first, then stronger, as if it too were alive, beating in time with something vast and unseen. Outside, the city screamed again. The webway screamed. No mortal throat could produce that sound. No living thing could endure it. It was the shriek of a million broken geometries folding upon themselves, a corridor of fractured space that bled madness into everything that entered it. Kareth's raiding craft, the Shard of Lament, drifted like a blade through the chaos. Its hull pulsed with enslaved souls, faint blue silhouettes writhing beneath the wraithbone plating. The engines emitted a constant, whispering chant, each syllable a curse against stillness. Kareth stood at the prow, his armor absorbing the glow of the void around him. Behind him, his warriors prepared. The Kabbalites murmured ritualistic oaths, each promise laced with venomous pride. Some carved small cuts into their arms, savoring the sting. Others adjusted their splinter rifles, whispering to them as though the weapons hungered for blood as much as their wielders did. The air reeked of ozone, soul vapor, and promethium residue. Ahead, the webway twisted into a storm of crystalline dust, an impossible storm in an impossible place. Fragments of other dimensions collided, sparking arcs of coruscating energy. The ship's pilot, a pale Sybarite named Velith, turned to Kareth. Her face was masked, her voice metallic and sweet. The path is decaying, she said. This route was stable 3 cycles ago. Now it bleeds. Kareth's eyes flicked toward the storm. Then we bleed with it. He knew what she meant. The webway was not a fixed path, but a living maze. Once long ago, it had been the jewel of the Eldari, their divine artery between worlds. Now it was a wounded creature, twisting in agony, and Kamara's parasites still drank from it. Velith nodded silently, and the Shard of Lament plunged forward. The storm hit them with the force of a dying god's breath. The walls of the ship trembled. Lights flared, then dimmed to a crimson pulse. For a moment, Kareth felt his consciousness slip, felt something vast press against his mind. It was not Slaanesh, not yet, but it was close enough to taste. A whisper like silk brushed his ear. You cannot hide from hunger, he hissed, driving his blade into the floor to anchor himself. The psychic pressure broke, leaving only echoes. Around him, the warriors staggered but recovered quickly. They had been bred, broken and reforged for this. When the storm cleared, reality seemed thinner. They emerged into orbit above Viridian Prime, a pale blue world scarred by war. Great plumes of smoke rose from the surface, visible even from the void. The remains of an Imperial fleet drifted nearby, hulls split open like carrion, their dead drifting in silence. Velith exhaled softly. The Maquis fought hard, she said. They always do, Kareth replied. It makes them sweeter. He opened a Vox channel to his warriors. Prepare the skiffs. We strike at nightfall over the ruins of their manufactorum hive. The Maquis will think their war is over. We will teach them how wrong they are. The ship began to descend, slicing through the planet's atmosphere. The view through the viewport changed, the black of the void giving way to clouds lit by fire. Below, Viridian Prime stretched like a dying beast, gray, scarred, and beautiful in its decay. They landed amid the ruins of the outer city. Broken cathedrals rose from the ashes, their spires still bearing the faint traces of the imperial aquila. The air was heavy with dust and the metallic scent of old blood. The Drukhari moved in silence, their shadows melting into the wreckage. Kareth raised his hand, signaling them to spread. The silence of the dead city was broken only by the distant whir of damaged machinery and the faint cries of survivors, who hadn't yet realized their nightmare had begun anew. Through the cracked remains of a basilica, he saw movement, a group of humans huddled near a broken generator. They were gaunt, wearing the tattered remnants of Astra Militarum uniforms. One of them, a boy, barely more than 16, tried to light a small fire with trembling hands. Kareth watched them for a moment. The humans whispered prayers to their emperor, their faith as fragile as the fire they tried to coax into life. Then he moved his hand slightly, and his warriors descended. The splinter fire was almost silent. One by one, the humans fell, paralyzed before their souls were torn free. Their pain filled the air like perfume. Kareth closed his eyes, inhaling. For a moment, he almost pitied them. Almost. But pity was a luxury the Drukhari had long since burned out of themselves. When the last body fell, the boy's soul hovered briefly, a pale wisp trembling in the air. Kareth caught it with a soul trap, watching as it flickered and was drawn into the device. The warmth of it spread through his veins, and for an instant, he felt alive. Then the warmth faded. It always did. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the Manufactorum ruins stretched into shadow. Something about this world was wrong. The air shimmered faintly, not just with heat, but with presence. Veleth approached quietly. "The homunculi warned us," she said. "This gate, it wasn't meant to open." Kareth's expression was unreadable. "Then we'll make it worth the risk." Behind them, the city groaned. Somewhere deep in the ruins, a faint sound began. A low, rhythmic hum, almost like breathing. The world, it seemed, was not as dead as it looked. Night fell like a bruise across Viridian Prime. The last light of the dying sun slipped beneath the horizon, swallowed by black clouds that hung heavy over the broken manufactorums. In the distance, the ruins of once proud spires flickered with faint lightning, illuminating the jagged silhouettes of fallen statues and collapsed towers. The scent of ozone mingled with the metallic tang of rust and ash. Kareth stood upon a ledge overlooking the ruins, the cold wind threading through his armor vents. Below him, the Drukhari moved like phantoms, shadows with blades, ghosts with purpose. Their movements were silent, their cruelty efficient. Every few moments, a flash of violet light revealed the demise of another unfortunate human, the air filling with the sharp hiss of splinter fire. But tonight, something was wrong. He felt it, a low vibration beneath the ground, subtle at first, then growing like the heartbeat of something vast and unseen. It pulsed through the ruins, shaking dust from the broken arches. His hand instinctively went to the hilt of his blade, the motion fluid, practiced, and utterly still in its grace. Veleth approached from behind, her voice quiet but edged with tension. "The ground trembles as if the planet remembers," she said. "There are echoes here, older than the Imperium." Kareth turned to her, his crimson eyes reflecting the faint lightning in the distance. "Echoes do not move," he said. "Whatever this is, it breathes." He descended from the ledge, motioning for his warriors to follow. They entered the Manufactorum ruins, a sprawling maze of collapsed machinery, shattered pipes, and rusting cogitators. Ancient banners still clung to the walls, their edges torn. The once proud symbol of the Imperial Aquila now little more than a shadow of devotion. As they advanced, their boots crushed bones scattered among the debris. The air grew thicker, colder, the darkness deeper. Something ancient whispered beneath the noise of dripping water and distant thunder. A faint light glowed ahead, not fire, not plasma, but something older, something wrong. It pulsed in rhythmic patterns, casting eerie shadows that twisted across the walls. Kareth raised his hand, halting the squad. The light emanated from a pit in the Manufactorum floor, a wound in reality itself. Around it, the metal had warped, curling inward as though melted by the touch of some invisible flame. Strange sigils pulsed faintly across the surface, written in a language none of them recognized but all instinctively feared. Veleth stepped closer, her armor clicking softly. "This is not Imperial," she whispered. "Not even Eldari." Kareth stared into the pit. Inside, faint silhouettes moved, shapes that almost resembled figures but dissolved whenever looked at directly. He felt a wave of nausea, not from fear but from recognition. The sensation was like touching a memory that wasn't his. A whisper brushed his mind again. "Feed it. It remembers hunger." He stepped back, gripping his blade. "Something sleeps here," he said. "Something that should remain forgotten." Behind them, one of the Cabalites, a young warrior named Dryth, leaned too close. His armor brushed the edge of the pit. The reaction was immediate. The sigils flared bright red, the air screamed, and Drythe was gone, dissolved into a storm of light and blood. The remaining Drukhari staggered back as the ground convulsed. The light from the pit surged upward, coalescing into a mist that carried voices, dozens, hundreds of overlapping whispers, speaking in a language made of pain. Veleth drew her weapon. "Kareth, I know," he hissed. "Prepare to fall back. Now." They moved with speed and precision, but the ruins were no longer quiet. The earth groaned as if exhaling something long imprisoned. Walls shifted, metal screamed. Then, out of the pit, it emerged. At first, it was only light, a pale, liquid luminescence that twisted into shape. Then came the form, humanoid, but stretched, melted, its limbs too long, its movements too fluid. Its face was a smear of agony, and within its chest flickered a broken fragment of a soulstone. It was not a demon. It was not a Drukhari. It was something in between. Kareth had seen many horrors in Kamara. The artistry of pain perfected, the beauty of torment sculpted into living flesh. But this was different. This was hunger given form, a reflection of their own cruelty made monstrous. It spoke, though not in words. Its presence pressed against every mind, showing flashes of memory, Eldar cities burning, ships falling into the eye of terror, the screams of those who birthed She Who Thirsts. Veleth fell to one knee, clutching her head. "It remembers us," she gasped. Kareth stepped forward, his voice cold. "No, it remembers what we became." He raised his blade, a slender curve of black metal that shimmered with captured agony. The creature tilted its head, and for an instant it almost looked sorrowful. Then it lunged. The clash was soundless, as if reality itself held its breath. Kareth met the creature's strike with inhuman precision, their blades sparking with light that didn't belong to either of them. Around them, the Drukhari opened fire, splinter rounds hissing through the air, tearing fragments from the creature's body. But every wound it suffered closed again, as if it were feeding on the pain. Veleth screamed an order, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Back to the ship, now!" But Kareth didn't move. His strikes were faster, sharper, his every motion a dance of elegance and fury. Silence returned to the manufactorum like a lingering ghost. The echoes of the battle faded into the distance, replaced by the low hum of decaying machinery. The faint glow from the pit was gone, leaving only darkness and the faint scent of scorched ozone. The Drukhari stood motionless, their weapons still raised, as if afraid that moving would bring the horror back. Kareth exhaled slowly, the motion mechanical, his armor servos hissing in response. His blade was slick with something that wasn't. Blood, a shimmering residue that evaporated into faint wisps of light. He wiped it against the ground, watching it vanish like mist under morning sun. Veleth moved closer, her posture still tense. "You shouldn't have faced it alone," she said quietly. "Whatever it was, it knew us. It fed on us." Kareth didn't look at her. His eyes remained fixed on the pit, now a black scar in the metal floor. "It was made of memory," he murmured. "Our memory, the pain of our ancestors made flesh. Perhaps a shadow of the fall itself." Veleth frowned beneath her helmet. "You think that was a piece of the great enemy?" He shook his head. "No. Worse. It was a reflection, born from what we are now, not what we were. The galaxy remembers, Veleth. The warp doesn't forget." As they spoke, a cold wind drifted through the ruins, whispering through shattered pipes. It carried with it a faint sound, like distant weeping. One of the younger Kabalites turned sharply, his rifle raised. "There's movement," he said. "To the east corridor." Kareth gestured for silence and motioned the group forward. They moved in formation, weapons drawn, every sense sharpened. The floor trembled with each step, the metal beneath them groaning under their weight. The corridor was narrow, lined with rusted cogitator banks and broken servo arms hanging from the ceiling. At its end stood a massive, half-collapsed door bearing the faded sigil of the mechanicus. Someone, or something, had scratched over it with crude symbols that bled rust. Veleth approached the markings, tracing them with her gloved hand. "These aren't imperial," she said. "They look Eldari, but corrupted, wrong. Kareth tilted his head, studying the lines. Homunculi work, he murmured. Perhaps from one who dared to cross the veil between life and the warp. This door wasn't meant to keep things out. He paused, his eyes narrowing. It was meant to keep them in. With a motion of his wrist, he signaled 2 warriors forward. They set explosive charges along the weakened seams of the door. A brief flash, a concussive crack, and the barrier gave way. Beyond the smoke lay a vast underground chamber. The walls pulsed faintly with an inner light, veins of luminescent material spreading outward like arteries. Suspended in the center was something that should not have existed, a stasis pod, ancient and elegant. Its design unmistakably Eldari, but far older than anything Kareth had ever seen. Inside the pod was a figure, frail, motionless, but unmistakably alive. Veleth's voice broke the silence. "Is that—" Kareth stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "An Archon, or what remains of one." The figure's face was smooth, unscarred by centuries of cruelty. There was serenity there, an impossible thing among their kind. The pod emitted a faint hum, maintaining life in suspension. Veleth approached, curiosity overcoming caution. "Why would anyone preserve a Drakari?" she asked. "We consume life. We don't keep it." Kareth's eyes flickered. "Because this one must not die." He leaned closer, reading the faded inscriptions along the pod's surface. They were written in High Kamara script, but the words were old, predating even the Great Cabals. "Keeper of the Silent Path, Witness of the Fall, Guardian of the Shattered Echo." Veleth's brow furrowed. "Guardian of what?" Kareth turned slowly to her. "Perhaps of the thing we just fought." The hum of the pod deepened, lights flickering. The figure inside stirred, eyes fluttering open for the first time in millennia. They were not the eyes of a predator, nor the hollow orbs of one who had given their soul to she who thirsts. They were calm, glowing faintly with an ancient light. The being spoke, its voice a whisper of silk and dust. "You've awakened what we buried," it said, "and now it remembers the taste of us." The Drakari froze. Veleth instinctively raised her weapon, but Kareth held out a hand. "Who are you?" he demanded. The figure smiled faintly, sorrow etched across its face. "Once, I was salvation. Now, I am only memory." A sudden tremor shook the ground. Dust rained from the ceiling as the chamber quaked. The light veins along the walls brightened, throbbing with rhythmic intensity. The being's expression darkened. "It knows I still live," it said. "The echo stirs. It will not remain bound much longer." Veleth looked around, panic flickering in her tone. "What is it talking about?" Kareth's voice was steady, but his pulse quickened. "Something born from the fall. Something older than our hatred." The pod's mechanisms hissed, releasing a jet of vapor. The being inside reached out, pressing a translucent hand against the glass. "Leave this place," it said softly, "or you will feed it again." Kareth hesitated. For the first time, he felt something he had long forgotten. Uncertainty. The sound that followed the shattering of the stasis pod was not an explosion. It was a lament. A deep resonant cry that seemed to echo from the marrow of reality itself. The air shimmered, and for a fleeting moment, every Drakari warrior saw not the chamber before them, but something beyond it. A reflection of the past, burning in perpetual torment. The figure that emerged from the shattered pod was frail, its body wreathed in spectral energy that flickered like dying flame, yet there was no frailty in its voice when it spoke. "The chains are broken," it whispered, "and the echo wakes." Kareth stepped forward, instinct overriding sense. His armor's sensors struggled to adjust, data flickering erratically. "What are you?" he demanded, his voice low, sharpened by suspicion. The being turned its gaze upon him. "I am what your kind feared most," it said softly. "The memory of what you once were." Veleth's breath caught. The words struck something deep within her, a resonance she could not explain. Around them, the light veins along the walls burst open, spilling a thick, luminous fluid that crawled along the floor like living mercury. It pulsed in rhythm with the being's heartbeat, The Drakari formed a defensive ring, weapons ready, but hesitation spread through the group like infection. Their target was no monster, no warp creature, but something heartbreakingly familiar. The being's features had stabilized now, taking on a distinctly Eldari form. It was beautiful, serene, and unspeakably tragic. Kareth's mind clawed for logic. "You were one of us," he said. "Before Kamara, before the fall," the figure nodded once. "I was a guardian of the silent path. We who sought to preserve what was pure when excess consumed us. But we failed. When She Who Thirsts was born, our souls were torn from us, and the remnants that survived became echoes of what was lost." It raised its hand, and the air shimmered again, this time revealing visions that clawed at sanity. The skies of ancient Eldari worlds burning in violet fire, cities collapsing inward like imploding hearts. The wails of billions feeding a newborn god of pleasure and pain. Veleth fell to one knee, clutching her helmet as the psychic weight of it pressed into her mind. "Stop it!" she screamed. The being lowered its hand, sorrow clouding its expression. "It must be remembered, because forgetting is what makes you her children still." The floor beneath them split open. From the fractures rose a tide of shadow, liquid blackness that moved as if alive, tendrils stretching toward the light. The echo was coming. Kareth shouted for formation, but his voice was drowned by the howling wind that erupted through the chamber. The Drakari opened fire, splinters and plasma bolts searing through the dark, but every shot vanished into the void without impact. Veleth's visor flickered, static overtaking her display. "It's feeding on us," she cried. "Our pain, our fear, then give it nothing," Kareth roared. He tore the power blade from his hip, charging into the maelstrom. The weapon flared with cold blue energy, slicing through tendrils of living shadow that evaporated into smoke. But for every tendril cut, two more emerged. The echo's form began to take shape, an abomination sculpted from agony. It had no single body, no defined face, only a collection of screaming visages that fused and split endlessly. The ancient Eldari's voice rose above the storm. "You cannot fight it. It is born from every cruelty, every scream within Kamara's walls. Every drop of pleasure stolen at another's expense," Kareth snarled. "Then it is ours to end." He lunged forward, his blade striking deep into the center of the writhing mass. For a heartbeat silence, then a sound, like laughter twisted through 1,000 throats. The shadow coiled around his arm, crawling beneath his armor, whispering to his mind, "You cannot kill what keeps you alive." The power blade dimmed. His breath caught as a flood of sensations. Centuries of torture, indulgence, despair rushed into his mind. He saw the gladiatorial arenas, the homunculus' laboratories, the shrines of endless sin. He saw himself reflected in every act of cruelty he'd ever committed. Veleth reached for him, her voice cracking. "Kareth!" But he could barely hear her. The echo spoke through him now, its tone mockingly gentle. "Do you understand? You are not its victim. You are its maker." The ancient being stepped forward, its light dimming. "Then we must both die," it said quietly. It pressed its hand against Kareth's chest, where the shadow pulsed brightest. The two forms, the luminous and the corrupted, began to... Kamara's skyline burned in perpetual twilight. Its spires stretched like the talons of some slumbering god, glimmering with light that wasn't sunlight but the reflection of agony, refracted through endless layers of mirrored reality. Veleth stood upon the prow of her skimmer as it carved through the air, the city unfolding below her, a maze of cruelty and splendor, where beauty was always edged with violence. The air here was heavy, not with oxygen but with the weight of souls. Billions of whispers rose from the streets, the sounds of suffering, ecstasy, laughter that cut like knives. Somewhere deep beneath the streets, the homunculi experimented on new forms of endurance. Above, in the galleries of the cabals, warlords feasted on the torment they engineered. And yet, tonight something else breathed beneath it all, something that did not belong. Veleth's return should have been triumphant. She had led her raiding party into the void, returned with relics, and survived what none had expected her to. But her triumph was hollow. The others had perished, consumed by the strange light of that ancient ruin. Only fragments of memory and that unbearable silence followed her home. The transport docked along the edge of her cabal's fortress. The obsidian spine, It loomed over the district like a black fang, driven through the heart of the city. The walls shimmered with layers of shifting metal, infused with liquid light. As she stepped through the gates, the guards bowed their heads, though their eyes flickered with suspicion. Inside, the corridors twisted like veins, pulsating faintly with bioluminescent veins. The architecture was alive, feeding on pain, on attention. Kamara itself had always felt sentient, a labyrinth that grew and changed with the emotions of its denizens. But now it felt hungrier. Beleth could hear whispers even through the vox band of her armor. Not the usual mocking voices of slaves or echoes of ritual chants. These whispers spoke her name, over and over, like the memory of a prayer she'd never said. She ripped off her helmet, eyes narrowing. "Show yourself," she hissed. A shadow detached itself from the wall, slender, elegant, and cruelly familiar. Archon Sithrax, her master. His armor was a sculpture of black glass and living sinew, his pale face a mask of predatory calm. "You've returned," he said, voice smooth and cold as poisoned silk. "With fewer souls than I sent you with." Veleth knelt, forcing discipline into her tone. "The mission succeeded, Archon, but the relic we recovered, it was not what the homunculi promised." Sithrax circled her, fingers trailing along the air as if tracing her words. "Not what they promised," he repeated. "And yet something followed you home." Her spine stiffened. "You've seen it too." He smiled faintly, emotion without warmth. "Kumarag shifts, my dear. The shadows have begun to speak in tongues older than our language. The homunculi whisper of anomalies. Energy surges in the low districts, screams with no source. And in the reflection of my armor, I see faces that are not mine." Veleth's pulse quickened. "It's the echo," she whispered. "It found a way back." Sithrax tilted his head, regarding her like a specimen pinned beneath glass. "You claim it was destroyed." "I watched it burn," she replied, though her voice trembled. "But it was never a creature of flesh. It was thought, memory, regret. Then it is home," he murmured. "For what city is more built on those things than ours?" He turned, gesturing for her to follow. They ascended through the fortress, moving through halls adorned with bone sculptures and fountains that ran red with distilled fear. At the apex, the view of the dark city stretched in impossible layers. Bridges suspended between dimensions, towers dissolving into shadow. "There," Sithrax said, pointing toward the farthest horizon. "Do you see it?" A black stain had begun to bloom across the skyline. At first it seemed like smoke, but as Veleth focused, she realized it was reflection. Buildings were mirrored wrong, their light bending inward, devouring itself. The air rippled, as though the city's glass veins were beginning to twist and choke. "It spreads faster every night," Sithrax said. "Some say it is a warp tear. Others call it divine punishment. I call it opportunity." Veleth turned toward him sharply. "Opportunity? It's corruption. It's consuming the city. And yet," he whispered, stepping closer, "those who walk into it return stronger, changed. Their eyes glow with light that isn't their own. Their screams feed on themselves. Tell me, Veleth, doesn't that sound familiar?" She stared at him, realization dawning like a blade between her ribs. "You sent me there on purpose." Sithrax smiled, a perfect, cruel smile. "The ruin was only a door. You were the key." Veleth's breath. The echo of the shot still lingered in the air long after Sithrax's body had dissolved into light. The chamber's walls pulsed faintly, alive with some unseen current. Veleth could feel the city breathing through her armor, the rhythm of Kamara's hunger, feeding, changing. She holstered her weapon and stepped toward the fractured window. Beyond it, the stain on the skyline was spreading faster now, rippling across entire districts like an infection in glass. She knew what she had to do. If the echo had truly nested within the city, it would begin where all contagions began, in the underveins. The lower districts where slaves, broken warriors, and discarded homunculi experiments rotted together in shadows. She activated her skimmer once more and plunged downward, through layers of the city where the air grew thick and the light bled red through the haze. The deeper she went, the more twisted everything became. Bridges looped back upon themselves. Streets whispered names she didn't remember. The scent of burning blood and promethium lingered with every gust. Once proud temples now dripped with ichor as if the city itself were weeping. She landed at the edge of a collapsed manufactorum, its machinery still twitching from phantom energy. Around her, figures moved, hunched, ragged shapes, half flesh and half metal. Former artisans, perhaps, now reduced to mockeries of life. Their eyes glowed faintly, their movements sluggish and unsure, like marionettes searching for their strings. One of them turned toward her. Its voice rasped like broken Vox static. You brought it back." Velith froze. "You remember me?" The thing tilted its head. "We all remember. The walls remember. The light remembers." She stepped closer, hand on her blade. "What happened here?" "It began in the mirrors," it croaked. Faces that should not have been there. They whispered promises. Some listened, some resisted. All were consumed. Behind it, others stirred. The glow from their eyes intensified, and Velith felt the temperature drop. Frost began to creep along the edges of her armor, impossible in a place like Kamara. Then she saw it, the reflection on the twisted metal beside them. Not of herself, but of a version distorted by hunger, her mouth open in a silent scream. She smashed the panel with her blade, but the image didn't vanish. It bled slowly, as if the glass itself were alive. The warped reflection spoke in her own voice. "You left us there. We waited." Velith staggered back, breathing hard. "You're not real." "Real?" The reflection laughed. "You think that word has meaning here? You made us real the moment you looked back." The air shuddered. Around her, the mock servitors began to convulse, their limbs bending the wrong way, bones snapping with wet cracks. Their eyes flared with pure white light. And from the cracks in the ground, something emerged. Tendrils of luminous mist twisting upward, carrying whispers that tasted of memory and ash. Velith drew her blade, a cruel, hooked weapon that shimmered with captured souls, and slashed at the tendrils. Each cut left trails of light that refused to fade. The whispers grew louder, rising into a symphony of agony. She fought through them, every swing of her blade echoing like thunder in that enclosed ruin. But for every creature she struck down, another rose from its remains, formed from fragments of glass, dripping with spectral blood, and through it all, a single voice carried, calm and low. "You cannot kill what was born from your reflection." Velith turned sharply. Standing at the center of the chaos was a figure she had not seen before, or perhaps had seen too many times. Its armor was identical to hers, its face the same, but its eyes burned with that same impossible white light that had consumed Sithrax. "What are you?" she demanded. It smiled, her own smile, twisted and sharp. "I am what you shed. Every doubt, every regret, every face you left screaming behind you. I am the echo that survived." Velith lunged. Their blades met in an explosion of light, the sound tearing through the ruined manufactorum. Sparks rained like falling. Velith stood amid silence so deep it seemed to hum. The shattered floor reflected her in 1,000 broken ways, each fragment catching her at a slightly different angle. Her stance, her breath, her gaze. All of them smiled faintly, as if mocking the fragile illusion of self-control she had left. She turned her back to the shards, but even then, she felt them watching her. The reflection was not gone. It had simply changed its domain. The city had become the mirror, and she, the flaw within it. Her armor flickered with power surges. The runes on her vambrace glowed weakly as her suit tried to recalibrate, feeding her blood with trace toxins to keep her alert. She looked toward the horizon through the cracked archways of the manufactorum and saw Kamara moving again, twisting, folding, like a living organism rearranging its bones. The infection was spreading faster. Velith activated the last of her tracking nodes and followed the surge lines deeper still, toward a district known only in whispers, the Mirror Way. It was said to be a place where time folded, where assassins hid in reflections, and where those who entered without protection emerged as echoes of themselves, hollow and obedient. As she descended, the noise of the city faded. The screams, the engines, the ritualistic chants, all silenced, as though she had entered the pause between heartbeats. Even gravity seemed uncertain here. Shards of architecture floated, suspended mid-air, their surfaces gleaming like the skin of still water. She took a cautious step forward, her reflection following, slightly delayed, slightly wrong. It tilted its head when she didn't, blinked when she didn't. A sense of vertigo gripped her stomach. Then a whisper rose, soft as breath. "You can still leave." It came from the reflection. Velith froze. "You can still be something else," the mirrored voice said, calm and eerily familiar. "Before the city finishes consuming you." Before you become one of us. She drew her blade, its runes flaring faintly blue. You're not real, the reflection smiled. Neither are you. The words rippled outward, distorting the space around her. The floor beneath her feet melted into light, and in an instant, she was falling, tumbling through reflections that flashed like lightning. Each one showed her a different moment. Her victories, her betrayals, her laughter when others screamed. Her face reflected 1,000 times, wearing the expressions of those she had killed. The city was showing her everything she had been, not to judge, but to feed. She hit the ground hard, or what felt like ground. When she looked up, the world had inverted. Towers hung downward like stalactites. Rivers of molten glass flowed upward into an endless black sky, and in the distance stood an impossible city, built entirely from reflections of Kamarag itself, pulsing with light and shadow. The Mirror City, Beleth's voice caught in her throat. So this is where it leads. Every building shimmered like a heartbeat. Faces swam in the walls, thousands of them, whispering silently, trapped behind translucent barriers. Souls, memories, fragments of identity. A shape moved through them, tall, thin, draped in something that was neither cloth nor light. Its face was covered by a mirrored mask. It approached with liquid grace. You came back, it said, its voice resonant, carrying through the reflection like a vibration. Veleth steadied her stance. I didn't know I'd left. You did, the figure said. When you began to forget what you were. The figure reached up and removed its mask, revealing not a face, but an infinite hall of reflections spiraling inward. Every possible version of Veleth, each one screaming silently into itself. The sight tore through her mind like static. She staggered, clutching her head. What are you? I am the collection, it said softly. Every echo your kind has left behind. We are what remains when desire outweighs the self. When cruelty becomes memory. Veleth's breath grew ragged. You're not part of Kamara. You're something else. The figure tilted its head. We were Kamarag once, before your people learned to love pain more than purpose. The ground began to ripple beneath her feet. She felt her armor systems glitch, her blade dim. Reality bent, the edges of the world fraying like unraveling silk. You think you can cut me down as you did the others? The figure said, its tone almost pitying. But every time you strike, you carve yourself. Veleth lunged, screaming, her blade flashing through the air. The figure didn't move. The strike went straight through, and the reflection behind it cracked, splitting open like a wound. From that wound poured light. It wasn't blinding, it was hungry. It clawed into her armor, seeping into the joints, into her skin, her nerves. She screamed as her memories flickered in front of her. Not in sequence, but all at once. The laughter of her kin, the screams of her victims, the thrill of the hunt, the hollow silence afterward. The voice of the echo whispered again. Do you see now? You are not merely part of this city. You are what keeps it alive. Veleth fell to her knees, gasping. Her reflection stepped forward, reaching toward her face. Its fingers were her own, but colder, sharper. Then something shifted deep within her. Not resistance, recognition. She grabbed the mirrored hand and pulled it close. If I am part of you, she whispered, then you are mine too. And with one motion, she drove her blade upward, straight through the reflection's chest. The sound was like shattering glass and thunder combined. The mirror city convulsed, its structures twisting, the faces in the walls crying out in one long, agonized note. The void had no sound, no light, only the slow, rhythmic pulse of something vast and unseen, a heartbeat echoing across eternity. For a long time, Veleth was nothing more than a flicker in that rhythm. Thought without body, will without anchor. The pain of her disintegration still lingered somewhere beyond sensation, like the ghost of a wound she could no longer touch. Then the whisper came again. It was faint, stretched thin by distance but unmistakable. It carried the same cadence as before, calm, patient, almost tender. You will not be forgotten. The words were hers. She drifted through the dark, following that echo, until something took shape before her. Not a place, but an idea of one. Kamarag's reflection, half remembered, half reborn. Its towers rose not from stone or metal, but from fragments of memory, twisting together into impossible spires. The air shimmered with consciousness, a living archive of every emotion ever harvested, every scream ever trapped. The city breathed, and with each breath, Velith felt herself coalescing again, not as flesh, but as form. A presence, a shadow with memory. When she opened her eyes, or the closest thing she had to eyes, she was standing within the heart of the Mirror City. Yet everything was different. It no longer glowed with menace, nor did it hum with hunger. It waited. The ground beneath her shimmered like black glass. Shapes moved within it, echoes of her former self, gliding just beneath the surface. They looked up at her as they passed, their expressions unreadable. Some reached out, fingertips grazing the barrier between reflection and reality, as if seeking warmth. Velith raised her hand, and they mirrored her perfectly now. No delay, no distortion. For the first time, she realized the difference. The reflection was no longer mocking her. It was her. From the horizon, a wave of light rippled outward. In its wake, the city began to shift. Towers folded inward, collapsing into columns of shadow. The walls between reflections blurred, and through those fractures, Velith could see flashes of the real Kamara, the one she had known before. The distinction between the two worlds was eroding. The infection wasn't confined to this place. It was spreading back into reality. Velith closed her eyes and reached through the air. Her mind connected, briefly, with something vast and ancient, a network pulsing beneath the layers of the webway. Not machine, not psychic, something in between. It hummed with voices, fragmented but resonant. They weren't screaming. They were singing. The song was wrong. Beautiful, but wrong. It spoke of unity, of the end of separation, of mirrors merging until there was only one image left. One truth, Velith recoiled, the realization sinking in like poison. The city wasn't just feeding on the Drukhari. It was evolving, rewriting them, fusing identity and reflection until individuality ceased to exist. It was transcendence through annihilation, and somehow she was its bridge. A figure materialized ahead, hazy, indistinct. It wore her armor, her weapons, her face, but its eyes glowed faintly white, devoid of emotion. It spoke without moving its lips. "You brought us back," it said. "You are the resonance between worlds." Velith shook her head. "No, I destroyed you." The echo smiled faintly. "You destroyed yourself. That is not the same thing." It reached out, touching her chest. She felt warmth spread through her form, then cold, then something entirely beyond sensation. Images flashed. The dying city, its streets flooded with reflections, its towers consumed by light. "You can't stop what you began," the echo whispered. "But you can decide what remains." Velith's voice trembled, but her will did not. "Then I'll burn it all." The echo tilted its head. "Even if it means burning yourself?" Velith stepped closer, eyes locked on its own. "Especially then." The ground beneath them split open, light pouring through like molten glass. In the distance, the sky tore apart, not with fire, but with reflection. The real and the mirrored worlds were collapsing into one, and Velith, standing at the center, felt herself dividing, one version in each realm, both aware, both conscious, both staring at each other across the thinning veil. For the first time in centuries, Kamara trembled. There was no boundary anymore, only the trembling air between one reality and the next. The mirrored sky bled into the real one, dissolving into molten gold and black glass. Kamara was folding upon itself, every echo, every scream, every living nightmare drawn inward toward its own reflection. Velith stood at the epicenter, feeling both versions of herself flicker and intertwine like twin flames devouring the same wick. Every motion she made was mirrored a heartbeat later, yet that delay was shrinking, closing into a perfect, simultaneous motion. The symmetry was beautiful in its precision and horrifying in its intent. All around her, the city's survivors, Drukhari warriors, homunculi creations, slaves, and beasts alike, began to lose their distinctions. They shimmered, like heat warping the horizon, and then split into endless duplicates that stumbled through light and shadow, unsure which world they belonged to. Their screams became echoes, their echoes became songs, and their songs merged into that same terrible harmony Velith had heard before. She could feel the melody tugging at her thoughts, trying to lull her into surrender. There was comfort in it, a promise of peace, an end to hunger, pain, and the eternal cycle of cruelty. For a moment, she almost gave in. Then she remembered why the Drukhari had survived this long. It wasn't because of peace, it was because of will. vicious, unyielding will, sharpened into cruelty to keep the abyss from consuming them. She forced herself to focus. The twin forms of her consciousness began to speak as one, their voices overlapping. "This city is no longer dying," said the light-born Velith. "It's evolving," replied the shadow-born Velith. "It's consuming us all. It's becoming us all." Their words looped in endless reflection until they became indistinguishable. Velith felt her sense of self unraveling, not destroyed, but diffused. Her memories bled through time. She saw herself as a child before the wars. She saw herself as a prisoner in the arenas of Kamara, as a warrior drenched in blood, as a ghost adrift in the mirror. Every life she had lived, and every death, were merging into one unbroken thread. She sank to her knees, pressing her palms against the shimmering ground. It was warm now, pulsing like skin. The Mirror City had become alive, not metaphorically, but in a way that defied all known science or sorcery. It had evolved into a sentient reflection, aware of its creator, and it wanted her. A voice resonated through the air, soft, cold, unmistakably hers, yet amplified beyond identity. "Become what you built." Velith felt her mirrored self step forward, closing the distance. They met at the midpoint, two beings of equal essence. When their hands touched, reality convulsed. The city screamed. Every building, every spire, every shard of mirrored glass cracked under the weight of resonance. From within those cracks spilled rivers of light and shadow, merging into a single fluid substance that defied color, like molten reflection. The song grew louder until it was unbearable. Then, silence. Velith opened her eyes and found herself suspended in a vast expanse of silver fog. Beneath her feet lay nothing but endless reflection, the merged memory of both worlds. She could no longer tell if she was alive or dead, or if such distinctions even mattered anymore. For the first time since her birth, she felt no hunger, no rage, no sorrow, only stillness. A figure appeared before her, not her reflection, not her twin. Something older, vaster. Its form rippled like liquid glass, neither male nor female, neither divine nor mortal. Its voice carried the weight of aeons. "You tore open what should have remained unseen," it said. "But in doing so, you have shown the path." Velith's voice cracked. "What path?" "The one between the reflection and the source." She looked down. The fog shifted, revealing Kamara, or what was left of it. Half of it still burned in the physical plane, the other half shimmering in the mirrored void. The two halves overlapped, pulsing like twin hearts out of rhythm. If they continued to merge, both would collapse into nothing. Velith knew what she had to do. To save one, she would have to sever the connection entirely, including herself. The realization filled her with both terror and relief. For centuries, she had served a world that only knew survival through cruelty. Now she had the chance to end that cycle, even if it meant becoming the last thing the city ever remembered. She raised her hand. Light and shadow gathered in her palm. It hums faintly, like the breath drawn before a scream. It is the silence of aftermath, of consequence, of memory refusing to die. Kamara no longer burns, because there is nothing left to burn. Its light has dimmed into a haze of dying reflections, drifting like dust across the hollow spaces where spires once rose. Velith is gone. And yet she isn't. In the heart of the void where the Mirror City collapsed, there lingers something that shouldn't exist, a resonance, faint but persistent, like the lingering afterimage when one stares too long into brilliance. That echo moves, rippling through the shattered layers of reality like a heartbeat through glass. It has no shape, no sound, yet everything it touches remembers. The Drukhari who survived, few enough to count, scarred beyond description, began to hear whispers through the broken vox lines of their remaining structures. Fragments of language, fractured syllables, nonsense at first. But the whispers carried something deeper: rhythm, tone, memory. And some among them began to swear they heard Velith's voice, not as a ghost, not as a spirit, but as an idea. In one forgotten subrealm of the webway, a homunculus named Synath awoke to find the mirrored walls of his laboratory softly trembling. The liquid stasis vats reflected not his face, but dozens of unfamiliar ones, faces of warriors, artisans, slaves, all staring outward as though waiting to be remembered. When he reached to touch the glass, it rippled, whispering a single word in a voice that was unmistakably Velith's. Stillness. He recoiled. The word carried emotion, something alien to his kind. Serenity. Elsewhere, in the markets of Low Camera, surviving Kabbalites who had returned from the outer edges of the city found their reflections delayed by a heartbeat. They would raise a hand, and their mirror images followed slightly too late, not mockingly, but watchfully, as though each movement was being studied. Superstition spread like infection. The Drukhari are not a people who believe in redemption, but they understand consequence. Whispers turned to fear, and fear turned to doctrine. They began to speak of the whisper that remembers, an invisible presence that moved through reflection, marking those who had tasted too much cruelty. Some said it was punishment, others deliverance. But even the oldest among them could not explain what truly happened that night when the Mirror City imploded. In the deepest hollow of the void, beneath the interwoven arteries of the webway, something vast stirred, not in malice, not even in will, but in recognition. Velith's consciousness had not vanished. It had diffused. She was everywhere reflection existed, in glass, in water, in the cold gleam of polished metal, in the eyes of those who remembered. She was not alive, but she was not gone, and through her, Camera itself began to dream. It dreamed of stillness, of an end to the gnawing hunger that had driven its people to devour their own kind. For the first time in its existence, the Dark City slept, and in its sleep it forgot to hate. The Archons noticed first. Their spire palaces, once alive with screams and ambition, grew quiet. Their servants moved slower, their blades dulled, their eyes unfocused. The hunger that had defined the Drukhari began to wane. Some called it a curse, a slow creeping death. Others whispered that it was mercy. Even the homunculi, those ancient surgeons of agony, found themselves unable to summon delight in torment. Their creations lay unfinished, their instruments rusting. Something within their very essence had changed, and always behind every surface, the faint shimmer of reflection remained, waiting, pulsing, remembering. A rumor took hold among the slave pits, that if one stared long enough into any mirror within the city, one could see her, Velith, standing amidst the wreckage. Her expression calm, her eyes like twin voids of mercy and judgment. Some swore she spoke to them, urging them to rest. Others said she merely watched, ensuring the city never forgot what it had been. In one distant chamber, beneath the ruins of what was once her laboratory, a single data slate flickered to life. No hand touched it. No power fed it. Lines of ancient code appeared slowly, as if being written from beyond the veil. It was her handwriting. The message was short, simple, and final. Reflection remembers what pain forgets. In stillness we are eternal. The slate dimmed, and in the reflection of its darkened screen, a faint shimmer of light rippled outward, carrying her words into the endless dark. Outside, in the greater webway, travelers began reporting distortions in their mirrored visors and armor plates. Shapes moving where there should be none. A sensation of being watched, not by the predators of the reflection remembers. The city does not. Years, or perhaps centuries, pass within Camera's fractured remains. Time in the webway is a mercurial thing, folding and unfolding like the skin of a serpent. To those who survived, it feels eternal, a stillness stretched too far. Yet the stillness itself is the legacy she left behind. Velith's final rebellion against the hunger that made her kind monstrous. In one forgotten sub-level beneath the ruins of the Cabal of the Bleeding Veil, a slave girl named Ishiel stumbles through corridors of silver dust. Her chains jangle softly, the sound echoing across the hollow expanse like distant rain. She has known nothing but suffering, and yet, in the strange, motionless silence of the city, no whip strikes her back, no overseer calls her name. The masters are gone, vanished into the same stillness that claimed their city. When she finds a cracked mirror leaning against a collapsed wall, she does not flinch. Her reflection stares back, gaunt, bruised, eyes hollow from years of terror. But then, slowly, something moves within the reflection. Not her. Someone else. A woman steps forward within the mirror, her outline woven from light and memory. Her features shift as though carved from liquid silver, familiar and strange all at once. Her voice is not sound, but thought. resonating deep in Ishael's skull. "You are seen." The slave collapses, sobbing, overcome by a kind of release she has no words for. The reflection's hand reaches out. When Ishael mirrors the gesture, her palm meets cool glass, but instead of pain, she feels warmth. For a single impossible moment, the mirrored world beyond seems more real than the ruin around her. Then the reflection fades, leaving behind nothing but stillness. Ishael looks around. The air itself feels lighter, freer. Somewhere deep below, ancient conduits hum to life, faint currents of energy flickering through dead veins of machinery. The city breathes. That is how it begins. The echo moves, not as a wave, but as a whisper through glass, light, and mind. It touches others, a wounded Kabbalite soldier wandering the lower decks, a broken homunculus staring into the silver fluid of his failed experiment, a young scourge perched upon a ruined tower watching her own shadow. Each encounters the reflection in a different form, sometimes a face, sometimes a voice, sometimes only the sense that they are not alone. And with each encounter, something ancient and terrible begins to fade. The thirst for millennia. The Drukhari have survived by consuming pain, feeding on suffering to sustain their decaying souls. But now, as the reflection spreads, the hunger diminishes. The survivors begin to feel not satiated, but whole, as if the wound itself has finally scarred. The Archons, terrified, attempt to reignite the fires of torment. They resurrect the arenas, summon the homunculi, spill blood in rivers across the dying spires, but the crowds no longer cheer. Their blades strike, and the agony feels hollow, meaningless. Even cruelty loses its taste, and through it all, in every mirror and polished surface, her image lingers, Velith, serene and silent, the architect of stillness. Rumors begin to weave through the few surviving cabals. Some say she ascended, not as a goddess, but as the echo of every soul the Drukhari ever consumed, united through her sacrifice. Others claim the warp itself recoils from her name, for she has created something the Dark Prince cannot touch. A silence without fear, a peace without surrender. Of course, no one can prove it. The Drukhari are masters of deception, and even truth becomes a weapon in their hands. But beneath all the lies, a quiet truth remains. The city is changing. Its heart, once a shrieking void of desire, now beats faintly with memory. In the depths of the webway, far from any living eye, there exists a place of glass and shadow, a cathedral without worshippers, built from what remains of the mirror city. Every wall reflects every other, creating an infinity of images that shimmer with ghostly life. It is said that if one enters this place and whispers their true name, the reflection answers not with mockery, but with understanding. No one knows who built it. Some believe it simply appeared, woven by her will from the dust of her own annihilation. Others insist it is not a place at all, but a dream within the dying mind of Kamarog itself. Inside, the light is soft and unending. Time folds in on itself. The air smells faintly of metal and memory. And there, at the very center, stands a single mirror unlike any other, smooth, dark, and perfectly still. When touched, it ripples, and one can hear a voice. Not commanding, not pleading, just there. Pain was never the cost, it says. It was the cage. And with those words, the mirror clears, showing the city as it once was. Alive, bright, full of movement and creation before cruelty hollowed it. For a moment, the viewer feels what it must have been like to live without hunger, to exist, not as predator or prey, but as something whole. And then it fades. What remains of Kamara drifts endlessly through the webway, no longer the jewel of agony it once was, but a hollow monument to its own reflection. The galaxy continues its wars. The Imperium burns, the Tyranids devour, chaos howls, and the stars flicker in and out of existence like embers caught in a dying wind. But within the endless noise of the 41st millennium, one note endures, faint, constant, immutable, stillness. Some say it is her voice that carries it, Velith, the one who saw her own damnation and chose to unmake it. Others claim it is simply the sound of Kamara's decay, an echo fading into nothing. But the wisest among the Eldar whisper that her act, though doomed and forgotten, was not in vain, because even a single reflection, no matter how broken, remembers the light. And as long as reflections exist, she endures. Her presence is not worshipped. There are no altars, no shrines, only mirrors scattered across the dark, quietly remembering the woman who looked upon the abyss and dared to make it still. A ripple moves across one such mirror now, unseen, unnoticed, in the cargo bay of a passing void ship. The reflection of a mortal crewman flickers, and for an instant, another face looks back at him. Pale, serene, infinite. Then it's gone. He never speaks of it. He never understands what he saw. But for the rest of his life, he dreams of a city of glass where no one screams. And in that dream, she waits. Velith. The reflection. The stillness that remembers.